I think I stayed with an Indian family about 10 or 20 years, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And they said, by the way, you give us a bit of extra money, we'll cook for you as well. And I thought, oh, yeah, delightful. So they cooked for me. I remember sitting there thinking, our food must taste like cardboard to you, because this is just enlightening all my taste buds. You know what I mean? It's extraordinary. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special relationship, the transatlantic podcast that looks at the news and leaves both countries saying, wow, we thought we had it bad. My name is Matt Johnson. I host a show called The Interesting Times, which looks at everything UK, in case you didn't get it from the accent, and everything from the US, and hoping that the American dream doesn't turn into a nightmare, is my co-host, Andrea Bridges-Smith, who has a show called the Phoenix News Network. Hello, Andrea. Hope we're all well. What's going on stateside?
Well, I hate to keep harping on how bad our former president is, although if you and I didn't do that, we would have 95% fewer things to talk about on this podcast. But Donald Trump is a little light in the old pockets these days, and he is wondering if anyone might be able to spare a quick $500 million. It turns out when he did the crime being fraud, that he couldn't do the dime. Because he had artificially inflated the value of his holdings, and turns out he doesn't have nearly as much money as he says he does.
Really? I mean, that would only make sense if Donald Trump was a complete liar. So please explain, Andrea.
Well, it couldn't be that. It's important to note that he is definitely a billionaire who has plenty of money. Endless money, no need to worry about that. But also he is out of money. He is Schrodinger's bank account. It is both full and empty all at the same time. The thing going on right now is that he owes about $464 million. Not sure what the exchange rate is, but that's still quite a lot of money on either side of the pond. And his lawyers have said, we can't pay that. So they're asking to pay less or to not pay it at all. Wouldn't that be nice? Or, delay it or something like that, because he's afraid he's going to have to start selling off properties at fire sale prices, which I don't hate the idea of.
Boo-hoo and all that. I mean, the good news for him is his Soviet sugar daddy has been re-elected again. So he can always count for another handout from him, I suppose. What is the dollar to ruble exchange rate?
I would imagine pretty dismal these days. It might be better to ask what the exchange rate is for dollars to nukes. That one might be a little bit more favorable. But speaking of things that both exist and do not exist, Matt, can you tell me, is Princess Kate dead or a cyborg or fleeing the country or a six-fingered fugitive from justice, or what the hell's going on over there?
Right. Okay. So Princess Kate, Princess Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Yes, she has now been seen leaving a farm shop with Prince William. Okay. And the conspiracies that are going on are ridiculous. Even the video hasn't done anything to quell the speculations. People are now saying that's not her, and that video wasn't recently taken. There are still Christmas decorations up. Well, speaking of someone who used to go to school with turkey sandwiches well into January, I can confirm that farm shops, like some pubs and garden centres, can be pretty slow about taking down Christmas decorations. In fact, for some of them, this only happens at Halloween, where Halloween decorations then stay up till the following Christmas. And then the cycle continues,
Right, yeah.
I'm particularly annoyed about this, though, for two reasons. One, I've been asked to give a shit about the royal family. And two, I'm actually defending one of them, Kate Middleton, because of the ridiculous nature of the tinfoil hat brigade. She's been in hospital having some abdominal surgery. I'm not a medical expert, although that hasn't stopped half of Twitter going on about it. And she'll be back in April. Okay.
Well, I don't know if you're anything like America, but we do hate to see women resting. That is why we gently encourage them to return to work as quickly as possible after abdominal surgeries, because, hey, if your stitches pop, you've got a stapler right there in your desk drawer. Now, go on. Don't be a wuss about it.
I mean, right, yeah. It's the equal rights lobby. Unless it's men sitting through childbirth, and then surprisingly, we're not so keen.
Yeah.
I noticed as well that Barack Obama has come for an unexpected trip to Downing Street. Could he have anything to do with her appearance? Back in the rabbit hole I go.
Well, yes, of course. We all know that he is part of the global elite conspiracy to it's something, I don't know. No one's ever been able to tell me exactly what, but it's very bad. I know that.
Yes. Absolutely. One delightful piece of news coming out of all this, though, is I see your very own Tucker Carlson has been duped by a pair of plucky young Brits who have managed to convince him that it was them that doctored Kate's photo, you know, the Mother's Day photo.
Right,
It's
right.
quite hilarious, but not the first time that they've done something like this. And I'm sorry, Andrea, producing my video on the whole Kate story that I did on the Interesting Times, I was doing some research and looking at videos. And while the UK's take was a little out there, shall we say, the Americans appear to have gone batshit over this. Is that something you picked up on?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of our whole deal now. Someone famous posts a picture and we get out our digital enhancement software and start zooming in, and we don't stop clicking that enhance button until we found something to freak out about. There, look at that pixel. It's slightly to the left of where it should be. The jig is up, you charlatans. Anyway, those people are a lot of fun at dinner parties.
Oh, I'll bet. I'll bet.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't know if you've seen this, Andrea, but voters in the Russian presidential elections had the option of having a photo done with Tucker Carlson. He truly is a patriot, but not of America. He's a cardboard cutout, I beg your pardon, cardboard cutout of Tucker Carlson.
So funny. I had not heard about that. Yes, I really hope that the Russian tourism board is paying him handsomely, because that's the only reason I can think of for all of this, yay Russia sentiment.
Every
Now,
man has a price.
this is true. This is true. Speaking of people who don't get invited to dinner parties very often, how is your prime minister doing these days in terms of popularity?
Yes, well, Rishi Sunak is still unpopular, hardly a newsflash. Although it's starting to look like his bombing in the approval ratings is starting to plateau. It's currently 18 points. Yes, you heard me correctly, 18 points. Getting below 18, of course, would only really spark the interest of Southern Republican governors. Can I do this joke?
I'd be angry if you didn't. That's a solid joke right there.
And there is a monthly roundup of plotting against him. In January, it looked like Suella Braverman was replacing him. Then in February, everybody said it was Kemi Badenoch. And now Penny Mordaunt, the lady with the sword. But none of them have really managed to convince the Tory faithful to get Sunak into the long grass. It's looking like he's staying, although Sunak must have thought his time was up when Obama came to visit.
Yeah, it's like, all right, time to go, time to go. Now, has the election schedule been set yet, or are we still on the edge of our seat about that?
We are all in this country still on the edge of our seat. Perhaps if we all told him we'd vote Conservative to swing the polls, then he might actually call it. Democracy, where have you gone? Yes. So I noticed, by the way, Andrew, I noticed one of my American subscribers was asking about how come the UK doesn't have fixed term parliaments like the US does. It's a great question, and I thought rather than give, write a long answer within that after that particular comment, which might not get picked up by all those interested, I thought I'd give the answer here.
Okay.
And it all comes down to Brexit again, well, sort of. Okay. So we always used to have fixed term parliaments. It had to be within 5 years, but could be called earlier if the Prime Minister convinces the King or Queen to dissolve Parliament. Then in 2011, they introduced something called the Fixed Term Parliament Act, or FTPA, which, as the name suggests, meant that the elections would always be held on the same date, which was the first Thursday in May, 5 years after the last one. Great idea, cracking idea, fantastic idea. We all know where we are, no and an ahhing, right? So
right.
The FTPA did allow 2 exemptions, though, to call it early. One is a majority in the House of Parliament calling a no confidence vote in the government, or 2/3 of the Houses of Parliament agreeing to have an early election, both of which happened for Theresa May's and Boris Johnson's government in 2017 and 2019, and both were as a direct result of the fact that Parliament was at a bit of a standstill over Brexit.
Okay.
Now, not a lot of people, I suspect, know this, but part of Boris Johnson's government manifesto in 2019 was to repeal the FTPA, which they did. So there you go. The Tories kept one promise: to trash our economy. Good job.
So that's interesting, that you guys used to have the term limits, and then the Tories abolished them so that they could stay in power indefinitely, which seems like they've done a pretty good job of doing. But yeah, I have to agree with you. This doesn't seem quite like democracy at all. Democracy is the people saying this is what we want, and then the government is supposed to do that. I believe that's the idea of it anyway. And you
Yeah.
guys have been having a lot of people for a long time now saying, we don't want this, we don't want this, we don't want this. And they keep on getting it. And that's annoying. We have kind of a similar thing over here in the US, but I'm curious if the Labor Party does get back into power, which, fingers crossed that happens
I will say
before.
this. I will say this, and people are going overboard about conservative wipeout, that sort of thing. I don't think that will happen.
Okay.
But all the polls suggest that it would be, unless the polls are absolutely manufactured and completely wrong. But if nothing else, after 14 years, people want to change. But it's
Right.
not just that; it's the cost of living crisis that we're having. It's
Mhm.
having a multi-billionaire that was responsible for the bankers crash, partly responsible for the bankers crash in 2008, in number 10 at the moment. It's the
Mhm.
fact that he got there without being elected by anybody, and the person before them. It's this whole thing. So people are just biting at chomping at the bit, as they say, in order for us to sort of have a go. So yes, as much as I can say anything is in the future is definite, I can say that Keir Starmer will be our next prime minister.
Well, to be fair, maybe the other side should have 14 or so years to clean up the messes before we,
That's
just
what you
to
need, right?
just to
Yeah.
balance it out. Let me ask you this, Matt. This is something that we deal with in the States, and I'm curious if there is this divide over there. So in the States, there's kind of a very big divide between cities and rural areas. So the cities are where all of the liberals are, the rural
Mm.
areas tend to be where the conservatives are. Obviously neither is a monolith, but that's the way things tend to work out. Do you guys have that urban rural divide? Are they as far apart over there as they are over here?
I would say yes, if not so. I mean, even more so. I'm broadcasting this from London,
Hmm.
and even more so with London, there is definitely a sort of a feeling that London gets all the money, which, to be fair, it probably does actually. It's probably disproportionate. Certainly not in the south, but in the north of England, there are places that get hardly any of the sort of the government help that the south gets.
Right. But is
Um,
it because no one lives there?
that's more to do with the fact that we've had far more conservative governments than we've had Labour governments,
Okay.
and the Labour tend to be what they call red wall MPs. That is,
Hmm.
because obviously it's a red party, and they will look after the people obviously in the north, but they don't get much in the way of money. People
Okay.
in the south, with the exception of London, which has become very, very Labour,
Hmm.
um, but people in the south tended to vote Conservative, and they tend to get a lot more in the way of the money and stuff that comes down here. There's this whole thing, and obviously Thatcher had a lot to do with that. She decimated a lot of northern communities, a lot of northern areas and stuff. And yeah, so in that regard, yeah, the money tends to sort of all flow southwards, all flow to sort of London. But there is, I think, culturally a divide between those that live in the city and those that live, in urban areas as well. And I have to say, certainly more in the way of people in the country towards people in the city.
Hmm.
Although, again, as you say, it's not a monolith, it's not a one size fits all, but there
Right.
is, from a lot of people, I think, a fair amount of resentment against those that living in the city and stuff. Um,
So let me ask you this whole put people on planes to Rwanda thing, which again, what an idea. Um, who are the people that want that? Is that more rural people who are pushing
I'd say
that?
probably more rural people. It tends to be the, and I'm very skeptical of sort of using language like this because I appreciate how sort of dividing and horrible and stuff like that. But
Right.
it does tend to be older, whiter, maler voters living in these sorts of areas. As somebody that's older, whiter, maler myself, I'm probably okay to say all that.
We'll allow it.
But again, yeah, I know we're going to get tons of comments from saying I'm an old white man, and I'm saying I'm not, and I have to say as well that I think the vast majority of people in the country just don't think it'll work and don't see the point. Even if you're sort of sat there and saying, it's even if you're sat there and anti-immigration, I think those people as well don't see the point.
Yeah. It's interesting seeing that because I feel like it's the same thing over here. It's these people in more rural areas that are more conservative that tend to be like, no, we don't want anybody coming in here. And it's like, well, they're not going to you, they're going to the cities.
Yes.
Where all the stuff is. That's where they'd end up. They're not coming to, Potter's Corner, population 210. That's not where they're ending up. They're ending up in the big cities. They're the ones that are affected by it. So if anybody should have a problem with it, it seems like it should be in the people in the cities that are most affected by it. But those voters tend to be more like, yeah, no, come on in. We'll find a spot for you.
Yeah. Which, funny enough, it's one of the things that perhaps we haven't quite done over here is because we have essentially we move large groups of migrants, refugees, asylum seekers to, by the hundreds to fairly small areas, and I think that's always been that's always been a sort of bit of an issue, and I think you're right. I think it would be far easier to have them accumulated. Because London is built by immigrants and in a sense for immigrants, I suppose, really you could say.
Yeah. I mean, Texas is the same. Without immigrants, nothing would be here. They literally build all of the things. So
Yes.
I know that the cuisine in London has improved over the years, but I also know that England traditionally has not been known as a place you go for culinary delights, let's say. And I'm not trying to shit on your people here, but you guys do like to boil things, I think. But I think that's been improving over the past several years. And I think we have to give some credit to the immigrants on that one, right?
Oh, absolutely. For instance, I mean, I've probably mentioned this already. My partner is British Indian.
Yeah.
And it's only when you kind of, I think I stayed with an Indian family about 10 or 20 years, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And they said, by the way, you give us a bit of extra money, we'll cook for you as well. And I thought, oh yeah, delightful. So they cooked for me. I remember sitting there thinking, our food must taste like cardboard to you, because this is just enlightening all my taste buds. You know what I mean? It's extraordinary. And it's the same, as I say, it's the same for my partner as well. We eat at some of the really amazing Indian sort of places to have a bite to eat, but not just Indians. If you can get food from anywhere in the world, you can get it in London now.
Yeah. And I think we should keep that in mind when we are coming up with policies around immigration. I think we have to keep in mind that there aren't just downsides. There's also good stuff. You're gonna get a really excellent salsa recipe. You're gonna get fried plantains that are gonna blow your socks off. You're gonna get Indian food that is amazing. I am fortunate enough to live across the street from an Indian grandmother who sends food over sometimes, and it's just every time it's just the best. It's so great. And so, that is what I think about when I think about immigration is I primarily Mexican food, really.
Yeah, I want to tell you this story. Back in the when in my younger days, I used to drive taxis. And I picked up this fare, two blokes, middle-aged blokes, I suppose, getting in the back like that. And invariably, the right-wing press goes on about immigration. It's almost like they're on a stuck record on this sort of thing. And this bloke was saying about some story he'd read in the press, blah, blah, blah. He goes, well, what do all these immigrants do? What do they do? They don't bring anything. What do? They don't contribute all this thing, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, don't get involved, Matt. Just listen to this stuff going on. Because it was a long journey we were taking into going to Southampton. I said, whereabouts in Southampton are we going? And he goes, yeah, the Chinese, please, mate. And I just thought, I'm done. I'm done, really? I'm absolutely done. And yes, I'm not saying that.
Of course.
Without pausing for breath, and that's what neither him or the other guy, just sort of there we go.
Fantastic. Well, I think that is an excellent place to wrap things up for this week. But we are going to be back next week. I want to thank all of our listeners and viewers for lending us their eyes and ears. Thanks to you, Matt. And if you are desperately craving more of us in your life, head on over to @TheInterestingTimes UK on YouTube to subscribe to Matt's channel. And while you're here, subscribe to @Phoenix News Network, and we will be back with a new episode of US News and Politics on Friday. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.